workshop to order. It's 6 o'clock. So we got a pretty good showing here, and tonight's agenda is to go over the master plan, and Tara, to have you help walk us through this. I think the best approach is probably going to be going over the action list first before we get into all the narratives. So I think we can. Oh,
Wow,
a little
there's
light. Oh, hi. So we can kind of walk through this, line by line or page by page. If you guys, something jumps out at you that you want to talk about. But the first section is kind of the establishing the master plan implementation committee. And then the next large section, starting at line 4, identifying natural resources. So one question that I had when I was reviewing this is, I know that there was talk about us rejoining the Lakes Region Planning Commission. Did that ever come to fruition, or?
Did you ever get the numbers?
Yeah, it was somewhere in the $9,000 range.
We should get a quotation. You think?
I would think so. Ultimately, it's up to the selectmen, right, to
Yep.
agree to this. But
They're
from what I've
treasuring-
seen and heard, they're
There's a wealth of information there.
oh my, and
For $9,000, it's
and
pretty
especially
cheap.
getting into all of this stuff talked about here.
Doesn't it also have to go to the town to be voted on? Does it say?
I don't believe so. No,
Oh, no?
no, because they backed us out of it without a vote.
It was all of us that voted to go, and those.
No, the Board of Selectmen decided on their own to
Right.
Right. but I
dispense
mean,
of it.
The planning board, we all voted yes.
for it, correct?
And then the selectmen shut it down. That's
Right.
So is what you're getting at that you'd want to see that as a recommendation in the plan?
Yeah, so you identified a number of things, and I think that the Lakes Region LRPC should be on the list of people to get back involved with.
Yeah, I think that's great. I remember I had that in my notes early on, but somehow did miss that on the way to the action plan. So
They also can do any level of work for us.
At a fraction of the cost that it would cost.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes,
I mean,
because we
from
have
A to Z,
discussed
they'll
them
handle
a lot
everything in
through the
between.
master plan.
well,
Yeah.
they receive a lot of different funding on your behalf as well. Transportation planning money and economic development and now housing. So things like we're doing here, you would pay by the hour like you do me, but there are a lot of things that you're kind of missing out on having a voice in the regional projects.
That kind of ties into being a new kid on the block here. I was wondering about best practices in other towns. That get captured in this, or?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Towns use it.
Lakes Region Planning Commission, I believe, is only the Lakes Region Belknap County
Belknap
towns.
County. I was on Lakes Region Planning Commission when I was DPW director in Tilton. And they have some very, very good resources that help out a lot of towns. I don't know why. And I can't only answer for myself, but I'm not sure why the board backed out of that. It was.
I don't know, but I know that of all of the eligible towns, Alton is the only one
Right.
that's not participating.
I would dare say it was one certain selectman, and that's all I was.
So, okay,
It's the Board of Selectmen that voted it down,
all right.
so.
Right.
So I think maybe we should, as a planning board, we would like to recommend to the selectmen that we rejoin. So,
I'm all for it.
and put that on our agenda for our next meeting. Does that be official meeting?
Probably would
It
be.
should be.
Better to discuss it at a
Yes.
regular meeting,
So,
since that's not on our.
I'll bring that up at the next selectmen's meeting as well.
But so I'll go ahead and add it to the working draft of the action plan, so we don't lose it.
all right, great, thank you.
I'm currently with Stratford County because of my, and it's just the resources there. And it's stuff that would cost the town a ton of money to do on their own that they come in and do for you for nothing. It's kind of a.
Yeah, there's a
no-brainer.
lot of things they do for nothing.
So So getting back on track with this, on this spreadsheet, on that first page, is anything here jumping out on the action recommendations? And keeping in mind that these are recommendations, not orders.
Right, as Kelly pointed out at the workshop, I think it was, that these are things to consider. So there aren't things that you have to do, or they're just things that the board should just at some point potentially consider implementing some of these things.
Well, this is a very good guide for anybody that comes in and to do something. I'll speak for myself in my project over to the village center. In the current plan, they want interconnected lots. We did that. They want stuff serviced by the sidewalk system. We did that. And so we're in the village district and we did that. So it hit a lot of those buttons that the master plan did, and it really made the planning process go quite nicely.
Yeah.
That's good to hear.
The only thing I'm thinking is, I mean, well, actually not as a whole, there's more members here now, but we kind of went over a lot of this stuff before. And suggested different changes. And I think I can see some of them here, which were, rather than saying, so,
We changed some of the terminology to make it
yes,
less,
and
um,
of an order, more of a, it's a good idea,
Suggestion.
not a do it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so,
it's hard to see where those changes are. So it's almost like you got to go over the whole thing just to, because
so we haven't made those changes yet because we were wanting this meeting. And I highlighted the ones that you talked about last time. So as we go through, they're highlighted. And then the next, so what we've been looking for and what I've been encouraging the master plan committee to get is the planning board's feedback on the direction of the plan. Not necessarily the wording yet, but the direction before we go any further. And so I did highlight a few from the last conversation, and I'm sure there'll be more to talk about tonight. And then the master plan committee is going to meet tomorrow night to re-look at the wording on those things that the planning board had concerns about.
so a more broad approach as opposed to really detail oriented. We're trying to do more broad, kind of quickly go through it all instead of nitpicking each singular word, maybe just the general
It's like the
action.
concept.
Yes, the concept.
Yeah.
Very good.
Right, so I think going through the action plan is a good way to do it because that then drives the background narrative, and I'll know I need to go back and adjust that to go with different recommendations. The background narrative is really just there to support the policies and recommendations. So I think if folks could, if they haven't already, glance through the natural resources recommendations for starters, and see, again, not, as Kelly said, we're not here to wordsmith. Your time's too valuable for that, but do any of them, give you pause for concern in terms of the direction of the plan is really the question. And I did have one highlighted, row 29, design guidelines was one you wanted to kick back to the master plan committee and have them rethink how they might protect the scenic hillsides and ridgelines without having design guidelines. So
We could look at Guilford on that. Guilford has an extensive scenic situation because they had gunstock acres, they had all kinds of hillsides that they wanted to protect to a degree. So I think Guilford would be a good source of just to peruse it so we see what's there.
Yeah.
Might give us
Easy way to
ideas.
start, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I'd like to back up just a little bit if I can, Tara. On line 13, it talks about 100-foot vegetated shoreline buffer where I think the state only requires 50.
Which line are you on?
13.
Okay, we just on 29.
It's kind of tricky.
yeah, and the
Oh yeah, sorry, 13 on page 2.
And the conservation- is Russ not there tonight?
He is not, no.
Okay, so the Conservation Commission, and I were recommending,
I know, let me Staples.
Here,
Excuse
hang
me.
on. Let's just, Tara, please. Go ahead. Tara.
so the Conservation Commission and I were both recommending that you at least consider 100 foot, because that's what the science point to as being particularly effective for keeping nutrients out of the surface water, where you have a developing nutrient problem in the lake. 100 feet is going to be most effective at keeping phosphorus and nitrogen away.
No, I
And there's a lot
definitely
of-
understand, the intent, and I'm gonna kind of make a general observation, as I read through all of this material a couple of times, and I did it again today. The perspective of a lot of this writing is clearly from a conservationist point of view. And I think you're gonna get some pushback from the town, because that tends to be perceived as an infringement upon people's rights and
Personal property ownership
And
rights.
I would,
exactly.
and I would say that it probably looks like that because I would say, I forget the exact percentage, but it was in the 90% of the respondents to the survey said that the natural aesthetic, the water is our goose egg, the whole thing. So that's why I think a lot of it went in that direction.
Yeah, and I think a majority of your committee probably also was more
Yes,
conservational
and I
minded.
was going
than-
to follow up with that as well, because it
Yes.
is a truth, yes.
To build on that point, though, to me, it's about show me the data. And
Right.
in there's a lot of qualitative discussion around the increasing phosphorus levels. Well, nothing in here actually talks about what the actual phosphorus levels are and are they really increasing? I think that needs to be part of this, both the document as well as what action plans.
And with history to where it's going.
Exactly. So how fast is it really, increasing in terms of those phosphorus?
So I think that's a great suggestion, Doug, that we're talking about in the narrative. I'm going to call it the narrative portion, the written spelled out, that having some of those facts and figures
Exactly.
to support this, I think would be very helpful.
Sure, and we can do that. I mean, we cited the studies, but we could certainly extract some of the key data points. And we can also do things like, and this is good feedback for my thinking to apply to the wording in general. We could soften this quite easily and say, consider amending the zoning ordinance to provide for a vegetated shoreline buffer. We don't have to say 100 feet. If the planning board would be more comfortable having some flexibility in that, because I think the consensus of the master plan committee, that everyone understands that it's going to be your job to feel out how to right size this to get a positive vote from the town meeting when the time comes.
And to that point, though,
Almost
whether
be a
it's 50 feet or
case-by-case
100 feet,
situation.
whether it's 50 feet or 100 feet, somewhat depends on what the actual phosphorus levels are and how bad they are actually increasing. If that's
Right, like
the
I said,
case.
it would almost seem like it would be a case by case situation as far as where the data stacks up.
It's possibly to consider a reduced phosphorus ordinance. So people aren't dumping the phosphorus on their lawns to make them nice and green. And lime is okay, I believe. But some of the other ones, like, I don't think the town uses any on their waterfront grass down there. They may lime it, but I don't think they put any enhancing.
But there's
Fertilizers on it.
certainly plenty of lawns along the shoreline.
Oh,
that are-
absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, and they're going to stay there, and they're
Yeah.
going to continue to look good.
And phosphorus levels vary from different areas.
The
of
soil
lake
level.
Also,
Mm.
from where you are, those all vary. What I've been told is that on the fertilizer, the number in the middle, it should be 0. That reduces the phosphorus. But again, I don't know if we can, I don't know if we can track, because it does change as far as, they must test the water
But
on
it's
Lake
in the
Winnipesaukee,
water.
right?
Yeah, Lay Lake,
Oh, yeah.
This is
Lay
actually
Lake
Lay
does it.
Lakes. This is where Lay Lakes comes in.
Right.
Okay,
They-
so they
they
must
do
test it
the-
on a regular basis. Okay.
They also do the disc. They drop a disc down so many feet until it comes invisible, and then they record that
Right.
elevation so they can see the clarity of the water. And hopefully they don't do it after a
That
big
would-
rainstorm because it looks like coffee afterwards.
That's pretty awesome.
Huh?
There's like 30 feet visibility.
Yeah, that's pretty darn good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Because you're the new person, right?
I'm a new person.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought. He's our new layperson.
All right,
You're a Lay Lake?
just a layman.
Just a lake.
But that has been going on since the 70s, as far as I know.
But Alton Bay has been out of it for a few years.
Why is that?
Somewhere along the line, whoever was doing it stopped and nobody picked it up. That's actually why the Conservation Commission is now doing it, so there's continuity. So just an individual is not doing it and reporting to UNH.
So UNH doesn't, I thought UNH used to do it.
They do it with volunteers. So if
Oh.
that volunteer quits,
Okay, then there's no volunteer.
they
Got
don't
it.
recruit.
And to that point, though, I mean, in 2017 was the last time there was a report on this in terms of actual hard data. That's, 5 years ago.
That's so frightening.
So far, we've been out 3 times.
You've been what?
We've been out 3 times on the bay this year.
Wow, that's awesome.
So that the whole quality of the report would be better if it had some of that data in it.
Exactly. If I understand, there really is no phosphate program on the whole lake.
That's the place where LRPC would
Yes,
be a
Yeah.
help.
but this is also be, maybe like Brock was talking with that Lakes Region Planning Commission, we could find out what other towns.
That's what I meant
That's
by
what he said.
LRPC.
LRPC. He was acronyming you, Tom. He was acronyming
Come on, Tom, get up in the lingo.
you. Sorry, Tom.
Sorry.
You're a layman.
All right, so, so the other question I had, line 21 on page 3. Provide
Bear with us for a
information on
second.
wildlife-friendly site design to applicants. I'm not sure that the planning board should be the responsible party for that, but we received comments from the Conservation Commission. And perhaps they could offer up their thoughts on wildlife-friendly site design.
Right, I think ultimately that would end up like in the planning board's regulations. I think maybe that's why planning board is on that.
Well, it's, and the reason, yes and no, the reason it says to provide information is that the state hasn't said that wildlife is a valid land use control. So all the planning board can do is say, if you move these buildings over here, you'll be out of this important wildlife corridor. So it really is an opportunity at the subdivision and site plan application, when they're in for a conceptual or design review, but it's tough to regulate it. You can offer incentives like if the board ends up going with a flexible site design in a subdivision, that would be one of the things you could offer a bonus for if you wanted to. So maybe it would be I'll add the Conservation Commission here as a source of information. But I don't think you would want to take out the planning board.
Yeah, I guess maybe I didn't understand the direction that was going and yeah, and I know that as a planning board member, I don't think that I could say there is a wildlife corridor, over to the east on this property, so we'd like you to build to the west. I wouldn't know that.
Well, there's little mini corridors all over the place. I mean, deer, if they have an area of least resistance,
Yeah.
they go it, kind of like the Indians when they came to Alton Bay. They
Yeah,
were
it's
a line of least resistance.
also kind of referring back to some information that's in the narrative in the wildlife section of the natural resource chapter. We have a little list in there. So when you these will all tie together. So when you say what the heck did they mean back in 2022, you'll have some narrative in the body of the plan as a resource. So some of the things are, obviously to concentrate development away from the critical habitats, try to have a buffer between human activities and the habitats, maintain the corridors, keep stands of mature trees, provide native plantings. So So the concepts are there for the planning board, and then we'll add the Conservation Commission as a resource on the specifics.
Okay.
The truth of the matter is wildlife friendly site design. They're opposites. They don't go together.
Say that again?
Wildlife friendly and site design.
And that's the list I just read.
Yeah, but it can be. I mean, you know, so you can be sensitive to the wildlife when you're doing your development. You know,
What, move it down the street? You must have heard about the woman that the town was putting up a sign one day, and she comes out screaming and yelling, I don't want the deer crossing here.
Good one, Raj. Can we bump up to 17 up there in that same page? The floodplain protection factor back, I'm gonna say 10-ish years ago, the Army Corps relabeled a lot of the floodplain districts in this town. And people that are on the river and the marsh area have suffered greatly because they've elevated that number. So if anybody has gone to refinance or sell in the new owner, they have to have flood insurance. And that water is dam controlled. It can't get any higher. It's going over the dam, period. So why are these elevations that the Army Corps did in higher than the dam?
So
It makes no sense.
this line 17, I'm not sure that's related to line 17, because this is saying that when the Conservation Commission is trying to decide between different land to conserve, they should consider protecting actual floodplains because they're important for flood storage, they're important habitat, the green space. I think if there's an issue with the mapping, there may be a better place to talk about that, like in the land use section.
I think sometimes it's difficult because you need to read the narrative, sometimes to go along with the action item to get the full scope of what it means.
Right.
so the intent for that was really that conservation should be focusing,
Okay,
ideally grabbing that land for their, if
Yeah.
they can.
well, they have the money, all the land use penalties goes to them and they spend it.
You don't have final FEMA floodplain maps, do you?
I believe we do.
No,
We don't?
not the updated ones, no.
You don't, I think you're the only county without them digitized or,
Yeah, we're working off of like 1988
Yeah.
maps.
yeah, and a lot, and I don't know how it's working there, but a lot of them, when they're digitizing them, they're not even re-looking at them and they're just moving them from one base map to another. It can come out pretty poor. You do need to keep a close eye on it. But there's a process for reporting any discrepancies, so I'm sure that the town has done that.
No.
No, I think probably just the individual property owners have at some point.
Yeah, because they were backed into it. I mean,
Right,
because
they would just, yeah, they.
paying $2,400 a year in, flood insurance.
Well, when they do offer a new map, you can appeal it and
Yeah, the appeal process, it has worked because my stepson was one of them. And, but it cost him like $6,000 to get to that point.
for the landowner, but when FEMA says, here's your new draft floodplain map, your flood insurance map, the town has an appeal process too. So just, we're getting a little off topic, sorry.
We are, yeah. But so keep that in mind when the new maps come in, you're in charge.
Oh, thanks. When are the new maps coming?
I don't
Just
know.
thought I'd ask that.
Don't hold your breath is all we can say.
So line 29 was consider proposing design guidelines for development on certain hillsides and ridge lines to reduce the scenic impact.
Yeah, so I have that highlighted from the last meeting and I wanted to hear more about your thoughts on that because I thought a few minutes ago, somebody was suggesting some hillside and ridgeline regulations to look at. And I had thought you were questioning having this at all.
Guilford is what I referred to.
Right, but I thought you'd correct me. I thought you didn't want this at all. I thought you didn't want, I helped.
We can look at it. I mean, I don't want to go with blinders on. I mean, let's look at it and maybe parts and pieces of it are good, maybe none of it good, maybe all of it's good. I don't know. I don't know what it says.
Yeah, again,
Because you weren't here for the other workshop.
No, I
So
missed
that's
that
why-
last
So
one.
we have, so
So we
Tara,
do
we
need
have
to discuss this.
additional
Yes.
people that weren't here the first go around.
So
Yeah.
when you say that I thought you didn't want that, I think you're probably pointing at me. And the reason I
Roger.
said that was because, it's there again, you've got people that own property and you're telling them they can't do what they want because somebody might want to look and not see your house.
But then again, to clarify, these are design guidelines, they're not legislation, correct?
Correct.
Well, no, the way that we would talk about this is, and maybe I need to clarify that in the wording. It's not a guideline doesn't mean suggestion. It means you can build there, but you have to follow these design guidelines. So it wouldn't be
Or the
saying,
guidelines, then that's legislation you're saying.
That's right. That's more than guidelines. Exactly.
it's not called, okay. I think this is what we called it when we wrote the state's model, but the point is that we're not recommending, and the master plan committee isn't recommending that you don't allow people to build in these areas. They're recommending that you say, if you build in these areas, you need to think about, a certain percentage that can be reflective glass, and make sure you don't just strip everything to do the driveway, and there's some trees left in front of it to kind of filter somebody's view of the ridge line from, say, the lake. That's how we in planning mean design guidelines. We don't mean them as suggestions. We mean them as more like parameters. So at the last meeting, whoever, and you're all really little on my screen, whoever was there from the planning board kind of was not in favor of this. So I think that's a good conversation to have tonight while there's more of you, and see where the consensus is.
Well, I think that was a pretty good consensus. You got me that's dead set against it. And you got Scott who was saying, well, let's look at somebody else's, how they dealt with it. So I kind of maybe, okay, let's agree with Scott and at least have a look.
Yeah, I think what we can't lose sight of is that these are recommendations only. So these are just
I hate
thoughts.
blowing smoke.
I know, but these are thoughts, things to think about as we progress, as we develop new zoning ordinances and rules and regs as the town grows here. So this isn't saying you got to do something here.
The thing about it is what we're losing scope of. If it's in the master plan, it's a legal document now. And so how can we legislate less than what's in the document?
Well, it's
It's
binding.
it's a plan, and it says consider.
The
it's not binding.
zoning.
Well,
the
if we
zoning-
have guidelines that said, you have to have the
Better go at
non-reflective
this
glass. And you have to
cautiously,
do all
having
that
been
stuff.
in other towns where
That's-
this has happened.
That's binding.
All right, hang on, one at a time. Say that again.
If we're legislating that they have to have non-reflective glass, trees in front of their house and whatever else that we legislate to put in there, that becomes binding, and that's going to affect property owners' rights.
Nothing in the master plan is binding, and I have yet to see a court case where it said otherwise.
So my understanding is that the master plan can be used as a tool that if Walmart shows up and says, hey, we're going to build a distribution center over here. You say, no, I don't want that. But if you've got it in your master plan that says we don't really have the room for that and we have no interest in that, that can be a tool used to push them back.
Okay,
I don't think so.
Saying no to, I don't want Walmart, although I don't.
I-
I wasn't saying no to, I don't want it because of master plan, the zoning committee, the public vote every
right.
year to get rid of Walmart. I mean, that's how that's gotten rid of. The zoning committee they do things. I mean, their whole thing is, and it's said every time, well, it does follow the master plan. Okay, so when you've got these shiny windows, they look here and the master plan says, get rid of shiny windows. Now they're thinking, oh, that doesn't follow the master plan, shiny windows.
And if you take the town to task on it, if it's in the master plan, you're dead in the water. Because the court will back up the intent of the master plan.
I guess that's not my understanding.
That's
but-
how it works.
I'd be
So-
surprised if
I
that were
think
the
the master
case.
plan should be kind of a guidance of where we want to go, not what to do to get there.
So I'm-
Again, I would come back to what Scott suggested. This is a pretty thorny area that other towns have been through. And if Guilford has got something here, I'd really recommend it.
Plagiarism is alive and well.
And take advantage to what's gone before and look at this
Don't
because
reinvent the wheel.
That's right. Yeah. The fire department does it all the time.
you're having been through this in another town in New York, it can be very dicey between what a guideline is versus legislation. And even if it's in the master plan, I would argue that that doesn't make it a binding law.
Right, so this conversation has just been all over the place, and I'd like to correct several things that I've heard, because that's why I think I'm here. The master plan is not legislation, it's a plan. It's the basis for your land use regulations. So I think it was Scott saying exactly right, that this is kind of the work plan for the zoning advisory committee, the zoning amendment committee, and in turn, the planning board. Courts hardly ever look at master plan language in New Hampshire. If they do, it's because there's something, usually a zoning board of adjustment decision that maybe it says in the special exception criteria that something is consistent with the master plan, and it's grossly inconsistent with the master plan. In that case, a court might look at it, but there's yet to be a court case that said, hey, you didn't do this thing that was recommended in your master plan. That just isn't what it's for and isn't how it happens. When the time comes, it's fine, look at Guilford. I can give you a list of all of the other towns in the state that have each of these kinds of overlay districts and ordinances. I helped write the state's model for the design guidelines for hillsides and ridgelines and several others that we talked about. But there's a lot of misinformation being brought to this discussion that I don't think is going to be helpful in the long run. It's not legislation. That's the zoning ordinance. This is a recommendation to guide your future amendments, and that's all.
Thank you, Tara.
Yeah, thank you.
I would like to add real quick, not that I agree or disagree, but just to state, when the Historical Society or anybody posts pictures of the bay when it was dirt roads, or 28A is this little winding, supposed to be meandering road, do you think that anybody picture what the town would look like today? Most people don't have that foresight to see that. So again, maybe not agreeing or disagreeing with everything in the plan, right? Just trying to do what's right for the town going forward. You have to think about the future growth and what is happening, and look at the growth that's already happened due to COVID, which was just sped up the process, right? Because progress happens. So the master plan, in my mind, is used to try to help us grow the town, because it will happen. But how do we want our town to progress? That's what the master plan is about.
Just keep in mind too, that back at the turn of the century, the 1800 to 1900, the town was much more populous then than it is now, much more.
The
But that's
thing
because-
with the
Because of the railroad.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
the issue with the hillsides and ridgelines, though, again, is not to determine whether growth occurs there, but I could show you pictures of hillsides and ridgelines where they had design guidelines and where they didn't, and the visual impact, the difference in visual impact is huge.
I.e. telephone towers. That's ridgeline construction.
Yeah, those are going to be exempt, but
Okay, so the planning board, I mean, as a group here, or we feel that we need to leave this in here as a recommendation for consideration down the road and to be looking at, Guilford's guidelines or,
Well, we should look at Guilford line. We should be educated before we throw anything to the curb.
Fully agree.
All right, so I'm gonna unhighlight it. We're not gonna kick it around again tomorrow, right?
Well, we're gonna kick it around again. I mean, you
No,
can
she
leave it.
meant
hi-
tomorrow at
Oh,
Master
oh,
Lake.
oh.
Meeting.
Oh, no, we're not.
Tomorrow's-
Every,
Sorry, I
They're
didn't
not.
understand that tomorrow is that.
That's a different hat.
we're counting on you for everyone that has planning board in bold to roll up your sleeves and dig into it in the next couple of years. That's the idea here. For each of these recommendations, there'll be homework to do and examples to look at. So I think there was one more highlighted under natural resources, and that was 38.
Lighting.
under the lighting.
yeah, which coincides with
36,
36
yeah.
as
those are the
well.
same, yeah.
We have, one thing that I've been pushing at is nothing over 3,000 K dark sky lighting. Just because it's a warmer light, it doesn't take any away from the lumens that are there. If you have like, say, a 5,000 K, it's the color of the light. It's not the light itself. Because a lumen is a lumen, whether it's white light or yellow light, it's still a lumen. And we've been pushing that, but there, we have nothing in writing that
We have
says this
nothing
is,
that says that.
this is-
we need
this
to
is the way we
order
do it.
that.
Yeah.
Right.
And the other thing, and again, I guess this one's redlined because of me. This, I mean, in our site plans, when somebody comes in and they're doing a site, like you did down there, we tell you what you can, do
What the lighting, yep.
Or any other site plan, there's a lighting plan. What this is looking is coming to your house and telling you what you can use.
No, so
Yes. No,
Does say when constructing homes, garages, et
Yeah.
cetera. So it does.
constructing. Well, I'm sorry, I misunderstood him when he said coming to your home. I
Yeah,
thought he meant like everybody that had a house that was using bright
Yeah,
lights.
we're gonna send the light police out.
You'll have a bear of a time trying to get the homeowner to comply with that. I mean, that's probably a road we don't want to go down because that will just be a monumental mess. But for commercial development, I completely agree with you.
Yeah,
Because they've got parking lot lights. I mean, the house, they got a light by the garage so the kids can go out and play basketball.
I think encouraging dark sky lighting, not requiring it, encouraging it.
Well,
on-
I
on
think dark sky
homes.
lighting might even be already there as a requirement.
So then it'd be guidelines again, and not requirements, right?
I'm not saying even guidelines. I'm just saying to encourage that the use of dark sky light fixtures on new homes and garages, et cetera, as opposed to requiring it.
Requirement.
And you'll see, I mean, you go to shop for light fixtures now and that's their
Yeah,
big
If
tagline.
you want to buy an area light from the co-op and have them, they plug it up and that's all dark sky.
Yeah.
But even though they're new lights the street lights they put up are 5,000 K, which I feel are hideous because it's like, oh my goodness, they're so darn bright, in your eyes, but it is what it
Light
is.
on the road.
Yeah, I mean, there's also how floodlights and spotlights are aimed can make a huge difference in
Yep.
impact on the neighbors.
Yeah, no,
We actually have a funny story. I have one about a mile away that was driving me batty, and I thought I was being just, a little bit neurotic about it. And then I was at the neighbor's birthday party, and the entire neighborhood was talking about it. So not just to be me.
Well, I'm kind of like a light Nazi myself. I don't like a lot of extra light.
So I've made a note to change this to be just educate and encourage, not regulate.
Yeah, I think from a commercial point of view, regulate. I think from a, private personal encouragement. And,
When we've
So
had
I would leave
come in,
30,
there's no
36.
pushback to that at all.
oh,
So
yeah.
I'd leave 36 the way it's worded now, right?
No, implement lighting requirements.
No,
Right, no, so
30
number 36 is just to ensure that the current regs are up to date.
yeah.
Right.
That's what that says.
Right, including
It
like
says
the
38, though,
3,000.
you were saying leave as written, was that right?
No, she meant
Oh, I'm
36 to
sorry,
leave.
I
as written.
misheard, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
she said leave 36?
Yeah, leave
Oh, I'm sorry.
36
Yeah,
is
yeah,
written,
36 is fine.
Yeah.
36, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've made a note to change 38.
and then
Okay.
38 was educate and recommend. Is that what that?
Perfect, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
But again, to clarify, is there anything in the ordinance or building codes now about this or not?
There's something.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what John might have. I know it's the only place that I've really been is through the planning process, is that we've been exposed to this dark sky lighting.
Maybe we should take
You
as an
know?
action to clarify that.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
recall there being an actual zoning ordinance
And I
that
know,
have anything to do with lighting.
Yeah,
right,
it's not in your zoning, it's in your site plan regs.
Yeah, that's what I
And
thought.
I wasn't really sure where this language came from. That would be a weird place for it to be. So we'll fix this.
speaking of lighting, Jess,
Sorry.
Prospect Mountain, the tower on Prospect Mountain, there is supposed to be absolutely no light emitting from the top of that mountain. And there's a area light on up there now that needs to be taken out. So you need to call the company that has the tower and have them shut that down.
Prospect Mountain.
Yep, Prospect Mountain Tower.
Not supposed to have a light.
Not supposed, not that can be visible 360 degrees.
That antenna's visible 360 degrees.
It's the lighting, Roger. It's the lighting. It's a star on top of the hill. That's not,
Red light?
no, it's a white light.
Aviation light?
The aviation did not require any lighting on the top of it.
Oh, really? They didn't?
Nope.
All right, let's-
None of them in Alton have lights on the top.
Right, so I think that's the end of natural resources.
Yes.
So historic resources.
Okay, where does that one start?
Right below the other one.
I'm showing.
Thanks, Raj. Oh, yeah.
So do we want to go over this yet, since we don't have the chapter ready? The historic resources, Tara?
I think we should still hit some of these bullet items. There are only a few under the historic, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, there was like 3.
they're pretty general. I think I wouldn't worry about, I think you might as well while you're here.
So we'll jump down to 43 at land use.
Well, no, I would go ahead and look at, just
Yeah.
give a shout out if there's any concerns at this point on the historic resources.
Yeah, I do want to hit on the historic resource because I think you've got 3 points here, 3 bullet points, and I think they're all excellent. And I think they need to be addressed. So I really agree 100% with this. Everybody else good with the historic or? So go down to land use. I know that this was a hot topic. I think I came in on this because I was late to that last meeting. I think this is where I walked in, right into the bee's nest.
Yep.
Right, and the formatting makes it a little less than clear in this, and it won't be formatted like this in the plan document, but everything down through 59, you see the little asterisks in front of it. They're all a bullet list under number 44. So we're saying to thoroughly review the zoning ordinance to make sure that it's bringing development in the direction that the community has said they want it. And we took a close look at the zoning and compare it with what we heard people saying. And then here's the list of things to consider. And again, we're trying to be careful and use the word, we say include consideration of the following. And that means that it would be the planning board's job in the next couple of years to look at each of these and consider it. There's no legislative clout to those words.
I mean, I said it the last time, I'll say it again here, that I think that our zoning that we've created, these, it's such a blurry, you know, we have a residential, a rural residential, a commercial residential. It's like, well, come on, let's make up our bloody minds here and let's make a decision. And we can do exceptions and variances, but I think the town would be best served to clearly identify a commercial district. I think identifying a village district. With
We
its
have
own,
talked about that numerous times over the years.
and I'm sure, and it's a huge, massive undertaking. And
We started to propose probably 10 years ago, a commercial district. I never saw this room so full. It was not well received.
Why was
About
that?
it again.
I know.
To build on the point though, I mean, residential commercial is an oxymoron in my
Yeah, it is.
mind.
Yeah,
You know?
Yeah, and that's all of Main Street.
I
It's
would
residential,
look at it.
commercial.
Well, and as you think about it, look at Main Street. That's what it is.
Yeah,
I mean, there's just as much residence as there is commercial, so why not call it what it is?
because
Because
that's
what-
where you create a village district or, you know,
Right, this town's done. This district is done. You're not gonna change it by changing the name of it.
oh, I think you can help it. I think you can help what potentially could happen down the road being a commercial in that commercial residential.
well, I'll butt back to your comment about Walmart distribution. And even Tom Hoops agrees with this, which is pretty good. We can have something like that, but have it buffered, have it set off the road, so you don't even know it's there. See, all these boat storage places that are happening right on the edge of the road, personally, I think it's awful.
Yeah.
Awful, but it's allowed, so you have no choice.
It's allowed. We have no regulations pushing them
but-
further back onto a
but-
site.
But boat storage can be in the woods. You know, you go there in the spring to take your boat out, you go there in the fall to put your boat away. And it doesn't need to be on Main Street or Route 11 or, right, it can go back. So my point I'm trying to make is we can have some of these things, buffer it properly.
But we're also a boat community. There is boats everywhere and you're always gonna have the
Yep.
biggest lake around right here.
Yep.
So it's gonna make, if we go in there and start telling people you gotta move your boat storage and you can't just do one.
No,
and
they,
then-
No, I don't
they
think-
wouldn't move it. No, they
Oh,
wouldn't
yeah,
move
yeah,
it. I just wish it was designed that way to begin with,
Yeah, right.
from the onset.
And
So
just
anything
be-
that we write is not, it's, everything that's already in place is already, it stays that way.
But the same thing about what you just said, now that makes that business non-conforming, which has its series of headaches with it going down the road. If they want to enhance their business, they've got to go get ZBA approval. If they want to expand their business, they probably can't. So
That's not how I'd recommend doing it. So if you did a rezoning like that, I mean, right now, we have this, the public and the survey responses saying they want to maintain the character of Alton Bay, they want to maintain the character of Alton Village, and they want more commercial opportunities. Your zoning that lumps all those together does none of those three things. But if you did separate things into 3 different districts and expand the commercial district the way the plan has talked about, where you have uses that you wish they weren't there, but they are, I think you want to have very easy regulations about how they expand. You don't want to make it onerous for them. There's no need to do that. You don't have to set it up to be a barrier to expand an existing use. You don't have to write your zoning that way. But there's a lot of uses that are allowed that could come into a vacant building that would detract from the character of those villages now. I think that's more the direction that you need to be looking.
Like when they took down the house and put up a Roma Joe's. Kind of. I mean, obviously, that's the district, but you wouldn't want that to happen, maybe, you know.
I was
Here at
criticized,
rural- In the
Village.
rural,
I
yeah.
was criticized many, many times why we let Aroma Joe's come in. I says, we can't tell what business wants to come in. The marketplace is gonna say what they want for a business, and Aroma Joe's felt there was room for them, so Aroma Joe's is here.
Yeah, I think that's to the point with 46, because, you know, as aspirational as that may be, at the end of the day, it's going to be the business person deciding whether they want, you know, position of, you know, an operating business in, you know, given site.
Yep.
Nobody wanted Hannaford's when it came.
No, and
You
they're,
know why Hannaford's is here? Because somebody had a wallet this tall. That's the only reason Hannaford's is here. Because you couldn't stop him. It didn't matter what it was gonna take, he was gonna do it, and it didn't matter, nobody could fight him. The town would go bankrupt fighting with somebody like that.
yep,
So eventually you've gotta give into that, or you're gonna go bankrupt.
They do the same thing with the cell towers.
Yeah, it's the same.
but
thing.
everybody that criticized them, I see them over there getting their groceries.
Hannaford's kind of did it right, though, right? So they went up behind
Right.
McDonald's, and they're buffered, and you don't see Hannaford as you're
And
coming
you're
into
right, but
town.
what I'm
So
getting
that's kind of what a lot of,
What I'm getting at is you can put all the rules you want out of it. You can put all the rules you want anywhere you want, and if somebody's got the money to do it.
well, and to your
Rules
point, while I
change.
do think to a point that is very true, I do. When Hannaford's went in, we didn't have the zoning that we're proposing, right? So maybe not, again, it's a location, but if you're in that certain location, that's when this new zoning would help us.
Two major stumbling blocks to that site were access. The previous owner tried for 25 years to gain an access off of 28. $300,000 check to the state, fixed that problem. Um,
That's what I'm saying.
and then it had massive poorly drained soils out there. They built a wetland down in 28 South to overcome that problem. Now, since then, the state has says, oh, we don't want you recreating all this, give us a check. So they put a price tag on the wetlands, which is a bad thing.
But we've come back to Drew's opening point here about commercial zoning districts again, I guess, which I still think is on the table as a discussion point, right?
I'd like to think so.
So we'd like to bring business into town, obviously, right? So we're trying to do it in a way that we want to see that come into our town, right? So the buffering setback in certain areas and make it more like that commercial. So that way you're not driving up the mountain or down, you know, on Half Moon and all of a sudden there's, you know, a business there or,
Blow a Walmart from the top of the hill.
yeah, you know, so just,
Right, and if we establish a commercial area with rules, then we make the rules,
right.
you know?
You know, I don't want Dow Chemical, don't get me wrong, I don't want them here.
And I understand, like, I remember the last vote when, you know, like most people don't understand when you're trying to make zoning changes, and people in general just naturally don't like change,
Period.
right? Period. They really don't. So they're opposed to it right away. So then they're less receptive to listening to your explanation. As far as just specifically about the commercial, like that zoning, if you maybe, it's really about that explanation. I think that's what the master plan is more about when we did the survey, or like if people came to us with questions, it's really open-ended, but just try to guide in the direction to give them that, educate them and give them that information.
If we do this properly and nicely, Alton's very lucky. Usually we have a residential and commercial which is your tax base. We also have the lake. So, you know, to blend something in there will help the lake people not pay $1,000 a month in property taxes maybe, or, you know, you get what I'm saying is we should balance things out nicely so all this stuff can flourish. And I don't want to look like, you know, Newington here at all. Don't want it. No, that's not what I like, you know, but we have to have an area that's conducive and has the proper land to do it.
And we also have to take into consideration the people that live here all the time and may want a certain thing, but a vast majority of people that come to this town, in fact, come to this town, it's tourist based. So, I mean, Not only is it
It's
just.
tourist based,
I
which
mean,
turns into
I don't know,
residential.
on the weekend, I don't know how many locals are actually at Hannaford because that place is just loaded with visitors, right? So I avoid Hannaford on the weekend, at all costs. So, I mean, and the same with cell towers, especially with people traveling. Aesthetically, maybe not the best thing, but
It's public
that's
safety.
progress. That's progress. Right now, everybody is loath to be without.
Mainly
And if
it's
they
public
want to be
safety.
without, they're gonna, they're gonna take a boat out to the island, right? So.
So the proposal as it is in this master plan for these commercial districts, is this different from what was in the original, that vote that happened last time, or is this?
It really never went to a vote. We decided to ice it because of the opposition that we had. And so that was the deal there. I mean, it's just, and plus when we found out that the meets and bounds of every lot that's included in this thing have to be listed in the ordinance.
Yeah, I
Grief,
know you have
metrified.
that in your ordinance, but they don't need to be. So that's something to
Well, we were told that by our.
file that in the back of your
So
mind,
I'm
that
not
it
gonna argue
doesn't,
with that.
it doesn't have to be, well, I've been writing zoning ordinances with town attorneys since 1988 in New Hampshire, and I've only once did it with that level of detail because a little bit of a district was being changed in a certain way, but typically we don't do that. Typically we follow lot lines, or we say so many feet from the road center line or from that right away.
And we didn't, we town of Alton changed that because we had that 200 feet of center was the end of the RC zone. And we had many, many lots that were bisected by the zoning line. And we just know what we had a year or so ago, what we had to deal with.
Yep.
And so that was changed. So the zoning line runs with the property line. So if you have a residential cursor lot, the back of the lot is now the same zone as the front of the lot.
Yeah, and that's common to follow lot lines because it's easier, but I don't want you to be hesitant to change the zoning district because you have misinformation about needing to have the meets and bounds, that the level of detail you have in the back of your zoning ordinance is not necessary.
So I think this is a worthwhile pursuit. I really do. And obviously others did 10 years ago. So.
Well, we truly need a true commercial district.
Yeah.
But it would be really, I think it'd be really helpful for me and for the master plan committee to learn more about the past proposal and why people were opposed to it. We want to make sure we're not recommending something that's dead in the water, but to learn from what happened 10 years ago. So any information that can be passed along to the master plan committee on that would be helpful.
Yeah. I think that, there may be some good information in there, but I think that you get so much resistance to change. You just do. And
That's basically
I
what it
can see
comes down
people
to.
throwing their arms up in the air and saying, it's just not worth my volunteered time here.
Or somebody thinks that their neighbor is gonna get something more or what, and then it's like, why should he get his zoning or be able to add on to his yard or whatever?
But you know what you do when it's time to work on these things, see if you can involve some of the people who are gonna be most concerned with, give them maps and magic markers and get people together to draw new boundaries. Let them do it themselves.
Well, what I have learned over the years is very rarely the people that complain at the loudest are the ones that come out.
Well, sometimes you can get them there with personal contacts. I always encourage schedule things when the squeaky wheel tells you they can be there, because that's, those are the people, they are the concerns. They're the people that need to be really sleeves rolled up, engaged in the process.
But it's so much easier to spread disinformation on Facebook.
In this booklet here, we got the proposed.
520?
Future
520.
520
Yes.
land use map. Unfortunately, there's nothing, I don't have one I can't put them side by side to compare them. I mean, what was it?
Yeah, exactly. That was my question. What?
Yeah,
what
so
was the
We did
prior?
have it in there. is it not?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I
516.
I'd mentioned this too, that the
516.
only maps that I could find for the existing districting are so blurry and so hard to read
Yes.
that, I think I made the joke, I'd like somebody to blow one up, to the size of this table here so that we can actually read what in the world's going on.
We used to have one. It was on.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
it seems
It was
like
by 7 feet tall.
my understanding, and Jessica can correct me, was that the clear map that we have on page 5-16 isn't the official zoning map, but the blurry one that you were just referring to is the official zoning map.
Yes.
And I thought that
Page
Josh,
is that on?
Josh was working on having the zoning digitized along with the parcel.
You were saying you were talking to John about having that digitized?
Josh,
Josh, okay, Josh.
is working on a project to have the town's parcels digitized. And my understanding was that the zoning was going to be done as part of that. And I had hoped that you'd have it by now. I don't know what the status is, but that would be really
I'll
helpful.
check with Josh.
Looking at 520, what was the rationale with the C commercial zone where it is?
Looking at developable land and to some extent where the water lines are, we looked at steep slopes and wetlands.
Going up 28 north, going up 28 north, there are no water lines. It stops at the
It's a Legion.
American Legion and the car wash.
For the most part, it's developable land that's around and adjacent to your current commercial area.
How do you propose to get access? That's a limited access road.
It's limited access. It's not no access.
No.
Yeah, if you don't have an access now, you're not gonna get one unless you're Bob Bear and throw $300,000
Yeah, well, I was
at
gonna
it.
say, I mean, but that may be the incentive for people to develop, accessible road and.
Yeah, they can get it.
They can get it too.
I think we've just depicted a very, very poor area for the commercial zone. It needs to be bigger. I don't know what it is right there, what the lines of it are, but I'm a little sorry to see the rural residential zone, even though it's a tough zone to do something. That's one of the only zones you can put multifamily housing in. And you've axed it out. Just wondering why that theory happened.
I think it's also allowed in the rural zone.
Yeah,
Change that.
but duplexes.
Well, along with this would be quite a bit of realignment of the land uses.
There's a lot of things that are allowed in the rural residential that aren't allowed in the rural.
Correct.
Also,
I don't
Lot
think so.
size is one of them.
Everything's allowed in the rural zone.
Yeah, I thought that was like a free-for-all.
Yeah.
Pretty
And
much.
that's,
with a special exception.
Correct, because I had to go through that.
So, I mean, if
There are a
everything's a
few,
free,
yeah.
if everything's a free-for-all in the rural zone, why are you taking away from the rural residential zone?
Where the plan doesn't recommend leaving it a free-for-all. It's recommending that you have your mixed business and residential in the village areas, larger scale commercial in the commercial, including multifamily, and have the rural area be limited to businesses that either make sense because they're rural, like a campground or something, or they need a large amount of land, but they're not high traffic. Like a contractor yard might be okay in the rural still.
Well, the way it
So
is.
I think-
I want to discuss that one.
Commercial in the center, and just out from that, you've got the rural residential, and then out from that, you got the rural, and that's the way that they line up, and that's the way that they would best work commercially.
Yeah, not according to the public, though. I mean,
Who?
the survey, I mean, we see the community saying the rural area is losing its character and the village areas are losing their character. And when
The- In
I
those
would,
questions, they said, get rid of the rural residential zone?
No, no, no.
I was quite surprised when I saw what people valued in the community and when I looked at your zoning, that looks nothing like it. But I mean, the residential world is just kind of a neither here nor there. But it doesn't create neighborhoods. It doesn't create a business district.
I just built a neighborhood up the street in the residential rural zone. And I didn't even need to go to the planning board, as it turned out, because that zone allowed it. I went there anyway. I went there with my site plan. It was approved. But in the final measure, Nick said, well, truth is, the rural zone, residential rural, you didn't need to come to the planning board
Major site division.
for a site plan, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm building a
So-
neighborhood. I'm building a conservation easement. I'm doing all these things that you want. And you want to nix the rural residential zone.
So I think, I don't think that this is the place that we're supposed to be focusing on where exactly do we want a specific zone, so much as do we want to define zones, specific zones?
Exactly.
And yes, get rid of residential, rural residential, get rid of that and have either one or the other, but allow exceptions and allow things to occur.
Why don't you get rid of the rural and keep the residential?
Maybe a proposal, we can throw this back for
I know the
some,
reason for that they won't like it. It's 1 acre zoning in the rural residential zone. Right?
some of these things need to be cleaned up from a definition standpoint, and then these mixed areas, which ones would fall specifically under, commercial versus the residential.
Right. So I just want to touch on this a little bit. So as the master plan committee, we did not have any discussions about acreage and building at all. And a lot of this did come from the survey results and what people responded. And as Tara had pointed out, how when she looked at all of those results and then looked at our zoning, how it's, two different ends of the spectrum. So with Tara's guidance, who has worked with the state and with multiple towns, this is some of the suggestions that she brought. So that's where this came from. And again, to Drew's point, it's not about being specific right now tonight. It's about, do you think it would be worth it? And then that's where the work would really come down to the planning board saying, okay, we got to roll up our sleeves and get to work. So tonight isn't about again, nitpicking. It's more like, do you think, would you even consider the zoning change? Basically, is this in a general direction of where we want to go? As opposed to where do we want the line? It's are we going in that direction? Is that something that you're open to? You are the planning board. Do you think you would take that into consideration over the course of the, next few years to do that kind of work? I guess.
And you have to separate yourself from but I built a development here, or I may want to build a development there. You got to pull yourself out of that.
Yes.
You gotta look at it
That's
as
not
a
part.
town.
I have made decisions on this board that have personally affected me to the negative. So I don't want anything to hear that talk aimed at me.
No. I'm saying that as a general statement but one, so I went through a highlighted here on page 518, despite very different characters, the same zoning ordinance provisions currently apply to Alton Bay, Alton Village, and the areas around the traffic circle in Hannaford. That's just absurd to me. I mean, that's just crazy.
One thing we need to look at as these respondents we had, they're all well-intentioned, of course. They do not have, I shouldn't say everybody, but not much experience in planning. It's our job to wade through their wishes and what really meets the whole town. Because I'll tell you, I have found so many times people move here, I have what I want now, and I don't want anybody else to have it. And that is the God's honest truth.
Yep.
But that's what I think the master plan committee has been doing, and why we asked only general questions in the survey. I don't like to see a survey drill down into how do you think this should be zoned. That's your job. And and as, you know, Kelly was spot on that this isn't the time to talk about where the line would go. That's why there are no lines on the map on page 5-20. It's just a concept plan.
And I would also like to say, to your point about making decisions as a board, and I know I brought this up at the last planning board meeting. So as the master plan committee, we did not sit here as a group and decide that we wanted to change zoning, and nobody in the survey said that they wanted to change zoning. That was just come about through what the respondents said they would like to see or not see in the town, whether they wanted to stay the way it was or minimal change or whatever that was. And then with us all working together and with Tara's guidance came these suggestions. So it wasn't like we sat around the table thinking about, oh, how can we change the layout of the town? That was certainly not how these proposals came about.
Yeah, this is the,
Oh, I'm sure
this
you'll-
is the, I want to go to California and there's a lot of different roads to get there, you know, and so this is kind of
Yeah.
narrowing it down to the most feasible, so.
I use Wolfboro, but that's
Okay.
California's up there.
A lot more roads go to California.
They're all backed up with cars.
I only really, I don't want to spend too much time on one question, but what's the I've only really heard one person weighing in on the rural residential district. What's the consensus of the board on whether that's something the planning board's willing to consider? Because that's all this says is to consider these changes.
Personally, I think it needs to stay.
As is, or zoning.
Well,
as
the
is.
rural residential zone needs to stay there because it fits multifamily housing really strongly. And I've always complained about that zone, that there's not a lot of land available because it's all up there.
So,
The Chamberlain farm, the up to your farm, that goes all that way. So it's a tough zone to do stuff in, but I strongly feel we need to, we talk here all the time. We need rental housing. And if we eliminate that and if we don't fill it in someplace else,
We
so
were proposing that it be allowed in the commercial district, just so you know.
And I guess that's a point that I would come to. I'd like to know more about what mixed use zoning, you know, all the elements that fall under that are captured, be it in commercial or if it's in the, you know, the Alton Village versus Alton Bay, and understand, okay, how are those going to be subsegmented?
So I guess like to generalize, like, so I get everybody's point about the rural residential. So if that would be the discussion, right? So you would be open to maybe creating just different zones, but maybe you just kept that, you
I'll be
know what I
open to
mean?
listen
Like,
to anything. As long as it does the town right.
So they have, you know, I do work in all sorts of towns, but they have what they call overlay districts too. And, you know, that, something like that could be implemented where
Our overlay district is the aquifer protection.
Yeah.
This whole main street that we
we
have to
can have
deal
an
with.
overlay district of the, that falls into that definition of your rural residential there, where it bleeds over into the rural area and the residential area. So, I mean, there's options for that, to approach that.
In trying to do something down in Alton Bay, wow, there's not any land down there to do anything with. There's just no options. You know, the campground occupies acreage and acreage. That would be a beautiful thing to do something with, but they own it and
Yep.
that's the way it is, you know?
Yeah.
But where else can you do it? You have 28A and Bay Hill on this side. So nobody's gonna like the steep slopes there. You can't put them all there. You know, and then the west side, it almost goes up as well. I mean, geographically, it's a real tough situation to try to change the bay. The bay definitely needs changing because it's when we were kids, that was a rocking place down there. And it was even more rocking before us. So,
Yeah.
So what we see in the text is that both Alton Village and the commercial district would allow higher density residential. So we're not talking about eliminating multifamily.
So I think the question posed though was kind of to take a straw poll here and I think you know, if I'm hearing you guys correctly, don't make me put words in your mouth, but you're saying you really don't want to see any change to the zoning setup that we have right now. Is that, am I?
I don't want it eliminated erroneously so something else can't happen. That's my major concern.
Yeah.
I'm not all tight together, but if you make it into the rural zone, then we go 2-acre zoning. I'm not going to be in favor of it.
Yeah.
Because
And all those little-
smaller lots mean people can afford smaller things on a smaller lot.
I guess the one thing I feel pretty strongly about is the commercial district and defining something that's.
That's where I would personally, I'd like to see our effort go into commercial,
Like to see what?
commercial area, commercial zone.
To define a commercial zone.
Yeah, that's, and I don't think we can bite too many bites out of this apple
Oh,
because
no,
we'll
no,
be
no.
overwhelmed.
This is a long process. This is not something that you just say, here's all the new zoning districts, gang. No, it doesn't happen like that. This is you know, but I guess what I'm hearing too is that step one really is probably, let's try and define a commercial zone. Let's
Exactly.
carve out a commercial zone as step one,
And then the people come.
and then the people come.
Before you can make any decisions, you have to have a place to put it.
Right.
A place to do
You
it.
have to
can't
figure that
say-
out.
You can't say, we're gonna do this, this, and this, and this, and then say, well, what are we gonna do?
And we hope to
You can't
find a
blindly
place.
draw it on the
You
map.
just- you
So
shoot from the hip at that point.
Yeah.
It's not.
You got to look at land, you got to look at topo maps, you got to look at all these things to see what's feasible. I mean, because it's the granite state and sometimes it's hard digging.
So the verbiage in the draft, I think I think maybe that needs to be,
On which page are you, Drew?
I am on 517.
Oh, 517 on that pack stack.
Where it starts to, it really starts to talk about the idea of the zoning. But I think that, you know, maybe going over that a little, and I didn't go through the wording, you know, carefully. I'm known to edit like a madman, but I didn't do that here. I just highlighted things that caught my attention. But I think that as generalized as we can be in the recommendations of reviewing what the zoning districts are and perhaps creating or clarifying new districts in the master plan, as vague as you can be. But with the planning board knowing, you know, that this is something that we're going to have to take on. I mean, and I strongly believe that we have to take this on. So,
Yeah.
So so it sounds like we are getting rid of this row 49. But were you more comfortable with the wording of the others in here?
I think we're very premature saying we're getting rid of row 49.
In that they're only saying consideration. These are all things just to, they all start with include consideration of, just to be clear. So are we okay with the rest? Kind of the way they're worded?
I think so. So I had a couple of other notes that are, so getting back to 49, just to say something to the effect of review the rural residential zoning district and consider incorporating it in the most appropriate adjacent district is about as neutral as you could get on that.
Yeah, I would agree with
I
that.
think eliminates a little.
Yeah.
I think that's a strong word.
Oh, yeah.
So we're not getting rid of the whole row. I'm cheered up by hearing that.
Then under number 50 caught my attention. I know it was minimizing the number of curb cuts. And I guess it says align frontage requirements on limited access highways with NHDOT driveway policy to minimize the number of curb cuts. I'm with that, but you know, the other thing that kind of caught my attention was something similar in like the village. If you drive through our village and drive through other villages, you'll notice that we have a driveway, a curb cut every 10, 15 feet, it seems like. You can barely get a parking space. And encouraging that pedestrian activity and
Where you looking at parking that you haven't got parking spaces?
what's that?
Where you said you can't even get a parking space, so I'm kind of trying to visualize where you're referring to.
Yeah, so even like down by Village Pizza and down heading down that direction there, it seems like there's a driveway. It's just one of those things that caught my attention, and I've driven through other towns, and they've minimized the number of driveways that access onto Main Street.
Yeah, but if you have people that own a
know how
driveway
you-
cut, they're not gonna relinquish
Yeah,
it.
no, I know, but I don't know how you solve that problem. It was an observation. It was just an observation and a thought.
But that's also probably because it's in the residential commercial zone and it wasn't, so that's why.
I think residential commercial actually stops at my house, I think.
No, it goes all the way down through, all the way down to the bay. No, no. Your house is where the soil gets really bony. Yeah, well, with a hill there.
The other thing, I mean, we're just talking about putting commercial business up on 28, and now you don't want to give them a curb cut.
Well, you minimize the curb cuts, not don't give it to them, minimize it.
Minimize the amount of business.
No. You can use shared access
More
ways.
like
Remember, they're not
Hannaford
located.
and Meredith Village are in the same area, but you have the same access in. So just minimize the number of accesses off the direct main road and maybe have an access road. Like the high school and the SAU building are in one.
There was time that
Access.
they pushed it.
It's a vision, that's fine.
In the town area.
Reality is
On the state
how
roads, I
likely
think
is
it's
that to happen.
Right. So that's where the other zoning, when we said try to.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
Give bonuses.
Yeah.
if people
Yeah,
wanted to do
Roger
things
knows
a
that.
certain Way, like the cluster or buffer or things like that to try to get people to do these things.
Right. Yeah, you were just hitting on that what I was going to mention to Roger was that by increasing that buffer and forcing people back, they are going to want to share their access.
Right. And then
And
earlier
that
when we
being,
just,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
earlier when we were discussing just those encouraging, when you develop and you encourage, so we could encourage and give maybe a props for them doing, like having an access road in as opposed to making multiple things. If we work some of those things in. was the thought
It wasn't
process.
that long ago, the state did not like shared accesses because they become a legal problem over the time. And so I know that a lot of subdivisions, that was what everybody started to do. All of a sudden, they started doing it because there's only one cut. And then that stopped. Only if you have like a wetlands issue or something like that, then they like the shared accesses. But
But is that still the case today?
I don't know, I haven't done anything.
Well,
I'm sorry, Roger, go ahead.
the other issue I see, I mean, and it's a great idea, don't get me wrong. I mean, I know like up there at the car wash, there's probably about 6 businesses there.
Yeah.
It's a great idea. But limiting the curb cuts, because what happens is it becomes a DOT thing because he built his thing, he put in 6 businesses. You want him to use that driveway for somebody else. But the state says, no, that's too much. You can't use that driveway.
Well, look at what happened with the Legion and the car wash. They were at swords points with each other there, and that's a shared access. So, that just verifies.
I mean, it's a great idea if it works, but
Well, I think on the other hand, if you get a large business that goes in, like at Village Center, right, at Village Circle there, you have multiple businesses, but you own that, you maintain that as the landlord,
Mhm.
right? And people rent from you.
Right.
So then you don't have that problem. So it really depends on what goes in there, right? And then have those problems. So I just try to, and I'm sorry, but I have the least amount of zoning knowledge out of anybody at this table. I
It's okay.
have, I just sit here and listen and try to learn. So I, certainly didn't come to this table with any bias on zoning because I have no idea.
Yeah, so, but it also, I mean, that particular line 50 talks about aligning it, I think it's aligning it with the NHDOT driveway policy.
Yeah, they miss the class play well with others.
Um,
And I see number 51 here, that's all well and good. But the lake lots are pretty compact at this point. There's not much more subdivision
Yeah,
that's gonna
exactly.
go
I was
on in the
wondering about
waterfront.
that.
So personally, I think you would just wasting time and effort on that where there's
Create a
no
lot of
land
uproar.
available.
There's really nothing there to put it on anyway.
Right.
So-
And then you go to Alton Shores and it's rural up there.
I think that came from Russ, and his concern might have been the remaining camps that could still be subdivided.
Or if the campgrounds, I think he spoke about if the campgrounds get sold off and split up.
Yeah.
That's
That's-
what.
yeah,
then
that's what I meant. I
subdivided
didn't-
into- Yeah, I think
I
that's.
didn't mean camps like vacation homes, but like the children's camps.
The
Sorry,
thing
what's
about
the
it is,
minimum lot size now?
in the 30,000 square feet in the Lakeshore residential zone. And it wasn't that long ago that you didn't have to have, were not required to have frontage. You were required access. So if you had a easement from Joe, your neighbor, that's all you needed.
Yeah.
But that was all subdivided back in the 40s and early 50s,
Yeah.
And there was no such a thing as zoning until 1972 here in Alton.
Then you got septic tanks on top of septic tanks.
Yeah.
Nothing- You can say what you want about phosphorus, but nothing, the worst phosphorus going into the lake, it comes from failed septic system.
Right, right.
Mhm.
And the thing about it is, if these camps are broken down into subdivision, the trailer parks or campgrounds, okay, say he's on 10 acres in the rural zone, it's 5 lots. That's if everything's good, really good, and so he puts a 3-bedroom house there, that's 450 gallons a day. At, all those lots for there, you probably would be lowering the impact to the groundwater with septic systems versus leaving the campground intact. So I just think personally, I think it's off base.
And the good thing with our lake is most of these camps on this lake, people like us don't consider them camps.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
not camps, they're.
When I grew up, it was a camp. I had to go out and chop a hole in the ice to get the water. Yeah, McMansion.
Yeah.
Yep,
Somebody's-
exactly.
So.
But the thing about it is that's all well and good, but how many bedrooms is it? That's the water usage. That's what we need to
Yep.
keep in mind. In the state reg, I think 150 gallons per bedroom is way over. That's 1972 regs, so in the state won't change those unless you take them to task and you beat them. And that's a hard thing to do.
So are we getting rid of this?
Say that again?
Are we getting rid of line 51?
I would say yes. My opinion.
Yeah, I think it'd be a hard sell.
Again, what are the, around the lake? I mean, Wolfboro or also Guilford, is it 30,000 as a minimum lot again?
Well, you look at, I don't know what their lot size are, but you look at their density and it's a heck of a lot more than ours. Guilford is very lucky because they're part of the Winnipesaukee River Basin Project, and that goes all the way to Ames Farm. So that's almost the town line. So Wolfboro has their own municipal sewer, but I think it's relatively small area.
It's a lot of aggravation, I think, for little gain, as I would see it.
Again, it's very compact. It's not going to change much overall.
Like you said, a lot of those towns that are that dense, like you get your Meredith, your Laconias, all that, all the way down through there, that all falls under Winnipesaukee.
Right, yeah.
River Basin, so, and that goes all the way to Franklin. So.
And Alton could have been in that for 2% back
Right,
in the
and
day.
you look at this as not just subdividing, but also, when lot line adjustments come into play, voluntary lot mergers, things like that, that could be creating.
Yeah, but
larger
the thing about it,
lots.
if you take 2 lots and put it together, so you had 450 gallons on this one, a 3-bedroom house, you have 450 gallons on this one. I don't think they might build a 6-bedroom house, but they can still support the load.
Right.
You know,
And I'm just pointing out.
yeah,
that
no,
there
I'm not finding
other-
fault,
Yeah.
but the septic loading is the holy grail here. I mean, that's really what we've got to pay attention to.
That was one of the very early on
Right.
in this, was keeping an eye on,
And I wish the state would approve chemical toilets, you know, or electric toilets. I think that that's a real bad thing. They'll let you put them on an island, but they won't let you put them in here. And therefore you have no black water. They have gray water rain gardens that if you have certain plants in there, it'll eat up whatever is in the gray water rain garden, but they don't allow it on black water. Doesn't make sense.
So moving on to the next page,
So did 51 go or stay?
I think the consensus
We
was it's
removed it,
gone.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think I had anything. I like 55, consider removing the restriction of one single family home per lot to allow 0 lot line condominium owned open space subdivisions. That's going to encourage more affordable housing.
Yes, it will.
Which is what we're working on.
Yeah.
At the alternative housing.
Yeah.
I like 54, the open space. I can't wait to see how that gets looked at by the public.
Which I think we were bouncing around potentially flexible zoning. I
That's
think
a good
was
word for it.
another- That was from Tara.
Okay, that's a good word.
Yeah.
That's a good word.
Yeah, instead of the, because what we were talking about was more.
Yeah, I like that word.
That's not tonight's discussion.
Those all I had comments on.
We should probably change 54 too to, because one of the things that the Alternative Housing Committee was talking about was having a bonus for smaller homes. We don't have that in here yet.
But that can be taking up under the ZAC.
And the idea is that everything the ZAC or Affordable Housing Committee or Planning Board do later on the zoning has some language in the master plan that is its foundation. So I just want to, you know, you don't want somebody to come back and say, but your master plan says incentives for natural resources and you're offering incentives for smaller homes. Where's that in the master plan? So if it's something that you might be looking at, we want to get the language in here.
Just wait for the ZAC feedback on that then, right?
So I think you want to plug it in here, just make a mention of it so that Zach has its own, you know, has a source where it's a little tickler to remind it to pursue that.
Look at this as being like your equivalent of enabling legislation. The master plan is going to lay out what changes you have support for making to the zoning and regulation. Not that you have to, but you'll have support for the ones you want to make sure it supports anything you might want to change in the zoning, subdivision regs or site plan regs in the next 10 years. You want to make sure there's language in the master plan to support that.
That's a tough one.
Well, that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I know, but it's still a tough one to catch it. They all go into a colander and some of it's going to go through.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's why we say things like consider and enable, and we don't put language that paints you in a corner.
All right. Any more comments on that? If we can, I'd like to kind of plow through maybe the written narrative aspect of this.
That's this packet.
Where did you want to start? Did you want to start at the beginning? Where did you want to
I'd like to
start?
start at the beginning. It seems like a novel idea.
It does, but
Oh.
I just have to make
Imagine
sure, Drew.
So just so I'm clear, I know this is a draft, but is the thought or the intent here that this document is going to be the one that goes out to the public to view and read and?
So this is what we have so far. We have not fully edited
No,
yet.
I understand that.
But yes, I think for the general overall, yes.
Okay.
Like I honestly was like, oh, it's all together in one staple. That was pretty cool. Yeah.
And
I was getting,
it's
you know, a
stapled in the
chapter here, a
correct corner.
chapter there, so.
Um,
It's not there yet. It hasn't had its final formatting. That's actually kind of a fake version that the planning board has so that they could see it all in one together, but it'll get some, the planning board has gone through chapters 1 and 2. And then we wanted to get similar feedback on chapters 3 and 5. I don't think we had 4 yet when we sent it out to you. And then when the master plan committee is set with it, the whole thing is going to go to you as a draft, to you as the planning board as a draft, and that's kind of going to be your opportunity to wordsmith it.
The crap out of it.
Yeah, I mean,
And I
that's,
just want to say.
So I should not be picking the crap out of it right now is what you're saying, Kelly, because you can see I
can
was
a little
getting
bit.
armed.
No,
I
you
want to start off,
definitely,
I hate the word cloud. I hate it. I'm sorry, to me, it's completely irrelevant. Big words, little words, taken out of context. To me, it's pointless. I'm sorry.
that's okay. Okay.
Drew, it's okay to have a soapbox.
Thanks. So we got, on this, we've got in fairly large font.
Can I just interrupt you for 1 second? Are we gonna go over the chapter 1 again? Are we doing this whole entire document tonight, or are we just doing 3 and 5?
so I guess my understanding was because the planning board has already reviewed 1 and 2, that we were gonna look at 3 and 5 as are we going in the right direction kind of check on things. And then when the master plan committee is comfortable with a complete draft, then it will go to the planning board to do the kind of wordsmithing that, you know, till you're comfortable proposing it for a public hearing.
Okay,
But if you have any other thoughts on the word cloud, Drew, now is the time.
now we'll skip that. I will wait until I have the other opportunity coming
I
up.
want to interrupt you, but I just.
Oh, you did
we
want to
already-
interrupt me. You-
But it was
You
time
went
to
over-
interrupt you.
I mean,
We went over that,
what's
so-
more important right now is that you guys tell your master plan committee whether they're going in the right direction or not, because when the project's done and the money's for it spent, that's your draft plan. So you only want to have wordsmithing left.
So I have one on 2.4. Again, it's the data for those phosphorus levels and having some type of chart in there that shows how over time these phosphorus levels are actually increasing. I was not.
Where
at
was that?
It's on page 2, section 2, page 4.
Wait, we're
We'd
not
like it-
discussing section.
I know
2.
that.
He
but I-
thought since you soapboxed, he
You
was
got
gonna
one
take
for
that
the
for a
cloud.
second.
All right, fine.
On 2.4.
2.4.
2.4. Okay,
He gets one on the.
additional language on.
That's okay.
Yeah, I don't think you'd put it there though. I mean, that's your
I
list of,
don't care where you put it, but just have the data there.
yeah.
I may have been known to soapbox once or twice myself. I don't know.
Never noticed.
Very recently.
But yeah, this is more is your master plan committee going in the right direction?
So we're gonna start on chapter 3, which is on page.
Great idea.
My sense from the discussion on the action plan is the answer is yes, you do feel like they're going in the right direction. Very, very few things that you were uncomfortable with in there. I think that's great.
And
I, for
I would
one,
agree with that.
I, for one, would really like a chance to read through these chapters And,
Oh, we're supposed to-
You were supposed to do that already.
okay, I
This
just
is
got
our
it tonight.
second meeting, Scott.
Okay, we've had this, the board has had this since May.
Yeah, May 5th.
Well, you know, I did read it. And it was, I'm reading through it again. Of course, I was reading back on chapter 2, but I know we're not there, but I mean, I'm just reading some of the things on chapter 2, and then I'm looking over here trying to find where it came in here, and I don't see it.
And it's not,
It's
because
not-
we're working
has
on
nothing-
3 and
has nothing-
5.
No, no. Well, this is chapter 2, but what I'm reading over here has nothing to do with this.
No, let me see.
It's
And I,
spread out as best as I could tell, but
from where I sit, I can't tell what you're referring to. Can you be more specific of what you feel it's not aligned?
My first comment when I came to the first meeting with the group was, I says, this has great bones. I was just afraid of, you know, where it went. I mean, you read this, this is wonderful.
Well, thank you.
It's an endorsement.
So you like
Thank you. Thank you.
Like I say.
wait a minute.
Now you
But-
come over here,
Trying to nail it down.
this is what they're selling. This is what
Right.
you're getting.
Right, no, so
This is what they're selling, this is what you're getting.
So as I tried to point out earlier, so this is just the action plan, and it's kind of like, if you want the definition of the action plan, you go here and you find the definition. Right, so this is just a short version, so,
Like a cover sheet type of thing.
so pick an item on that action plan that you couldn't find in the narrative section.
and
But
so
also, I mean,
this
talk
mass. Sorry,
Go
Tara,
go ahead and talk about the format, though. I mean, you could have the policies and recommendations in the text instead of all in one place at the end, if you'd feel more comfortable with that and be able to see better how it all ties together. That would be fine.
I'd go with recreation focus. I didn't see anything about recreation in there.
so if you could tell the group what page you're on and in which packet,
2.5,
okay.
recreation focus.
So we're
in
not
chapter
in,
2.
so Roger,
Why?
so this,
You just asked me.
No, 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 listen.
Show you where,
right,
what I
but
was
this,
talking about, and that's what I did.
this action plan is just specifically for chapter 3 and 5, I believe. So
Yes.
this action plan won't start until page 3.1. Because we've already looked at the first 2 chapters. So tonight with the planning board, we're looking at these additional
Look at
ones.
the first 2 chapters.
So apparently that last meeting that I
No, I
came in
was
late
there.
on,
This is the same stuff that we did at the last meeting. There.
can't answer the question then.
I don't know what.
You might as well
the-
just-
No,
You might as well just move on. I'm just saying.
And we haven't finished the recreational.
But so the first 2 chapters are the vision and goals and priority issues. Those are dealt with all throughout the plan. They won't have their own action items. They're driving the tone and the goals of natural resources, of land use, of infrastructure.
So this is kind of like the forefront of your reading. Those first 2 chapters, it's kind of like your table of contents with some beef and meat to it.
But it's here,
It's our vision and goals to set the tone for the rest of the document.
right, it's here's where we want to go. And then the action plan is here's how we're gonna get there.
Right.
Well,
So-
this was designed for chapters 3 and 5, not for 1 and 2, right? Is that what?
That's what she
Right,
said.
but so,
I think that's where Roger's kind of getting confused, because he's looking. at
yeah,
this
so
one.
so when we look at the packet, okay, so we have chapter 1 is introduction and vision, and then 2 is priorities for the next 10 years. So these is the first chapter is our vision, and the second chapter is our goals. And then this, for our meeting, skips directly to chapter 3, which is where the action plan picks up.
My sense would be to the question about the actions, it may be better to put them in the body of the text simply because it's a long list at the end. And I don't know, personally, my eyes start glazing over when I go through that entire action list. So segmenting it relative to the different
sections within chapter 3, I think would be a little easier to follow potentially.
We could do both too. I mean, if,
Yeah, you could do that too.
and then the action plan is kind of like your it's your work plan for the next 10 years. But we could go ahead and put the policies and recommendations throughout the document in the sections that talk about them. I think that would help some people see the linkage better. We can talk about that more with the master plan committee tomorrow night. But all of the items in the action plan I mean, one check on it is for you guys to say, well, is this consistent with the vision and goals? Is everything we talk about in the action plan should be consistent with the vision and goals? Nothing should be contrary or going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and I guess maybe on 310, this whole vegetation buffer zone, isn't some of that text inconsistent with what we talked about the action plan? One of the action, which one was it?
No,
The
this
wetlands.
actually gives you the source for the 100 feet.
Could you repeat the question again? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm just making certain that the body of the text on the wetlands on 310
Mhm.
about the buffer zones for setbacks is consistent with what we talked about on the actions.
Yeah, I think it is, because that was something that I had highlighted.
I think you're confusing the setback from surface waters, like lakes and rivers, and the setback from wetlands. We're not the master plan committee is not recommending 100-foot setback from wetlands.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, that's one of wetlands.
Yeah, because there's
I think we're gonna have to try to
Simplify it. a little bit.
simplify that for people, because I think Roger and somebody else they came to that same conclusion as well. So with 2 or 3 people reading it and coming, to that same place, maybe we can try to,
I'm looking at action 13, which I think is inconsistent with the body of that text.
Yeah, it's not. Look on page 3-5 of the body of the text, and you'll see the source actually for the 100 feet.
If you go to your action item 18,
It matches
it matches this.
But what Kelly's point is good, that if we've had 2 people confused, I need to do a better job in the wording.
Yes.
One thing I noticed back a few pages on 3.3, referring to the soil on the lakeshore area as well-drained soils. That is really incorrect. They are not very well drained. There's a lot of clay in the soil there. I mean, it's very, very dense blue clay. So that's just an observation. 3.3, the first basically big paragraph from the top, about halfway down, it says, unfortunately, septic failures have been rare due to well-drained soils. And the soils are around the lake itself. They're horrible.
Yeah,
Unless you go to Camp DeWitt, then they're not so bad, but because it's flatter there.
yeah, I thought so too. That came from a local source, and I wondered about that too.
If that was referring to the downtown area, I would agree completely. But that's not lake dirt.
Yeah.
I could say up at East Side Drive, it's all sand.
Yep, that's an area there, yep. You get a little pocket of it there.
We can, yeah, I'll just take that phrase out.
But the generality of the soil is not good.
And I mean, something that this leaves out is that if it's well drained, it's not attenuating nitrogen and phosphorus well, and that's part of the problem with the lake. Failures aren't what are hurt in the lake. It's the sandy soils that doesn't have any way for the nitrogen and phosphorus to stick onto the soil.
A lot of this stuff in these chapters we've gone through already.
Yeah.
The minimum lighting, stuff like that.
Yeah. So again, if it's in the action plan, it's in
Right,
here.
yeah, I get that.
Yep,
No, I-
okay,
I-
okay.
I figured
Yep,
that out.
sorry.
It's very well written. It's very well, I think.
So just to give a little backdrop, so obviously, I would say obviously, because the master plan committee was asked by the planning board, we've been working, I think, over a year. Just about a year?
October 7th or the 17th of 2020 was our first meeting.
Who's
Okay,
counting?
so we've been working on this.
Almost 2 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all a blur,
How time
honestly.
flies, huh?
It's been a lot of work.
Kelly, I know this isn't the final draft, but it might be in a better, to try to simplify this a little bit so that the common, I mean, we're sitting on a board and actually do this all the time, but somebody grabbing this off the street to pick this up and read it, they'd look at this and go.
We are trying to do
And
that.
I get that, I'm just saying
Yep.
it maybe.
Some of it can
try
be.
to Simplify it a little bit, just so
Yep,
people can actually pick it up and
Yep.
understand what we're.
we
No,
have had
it's-
those
yeah.
conversations. Yep. Yep.
That's definitely good feedback.
Yeah.
'cause That was. sort
Well,
of an
and
issue.
again, when Mr. Brown had commented, about, like if somebody's reading it and there's more than, one or two people that have a question, well, then obviously we need to change
Something
that,
needs to
right?
be fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Well, I'm not always sure how to reach that balance with some of you want more data in it and others want it simpler to read, because I think those work against each other.
Um,
A lot of information. So, it's a lot of stuff that we're trying to explain, and I think.
yeah, and I think in sections, right? So the graphic and the data was asked to put in that one section, but if we can overall try to make it somewhat easier reading for the average person,
Right.
obviously that is our game, our end game. We
I
would
think
like
as
to
far as the
try.
Content in it, I think it's good. I just, like.
Yeah, the content's amazing.
Yeah, it is, it's heavy reading. It really
It
is.
is. It's
It
not-
is.
yeah.
And I mean, and I think,
But if you're
It's the
interested.
nature of
you're
the
gonna read
beast.
it.
Yes, exactly.
If you're gonna sit down and read it. It's-
and I think that's kind of what it comes down to at some point. Like if you want to read it, you're gonna read it.
Right.
Especially after 2 years of work, I think.
On 3.8, just above wetlands, 100-foot shoreline buffer, we mentioned it earlier. I just think that's gonna axe out lots of building lots. And where the state is 50 foot, I'd like to stay with 50 feet.
That was my point earlier, I think. Yeah.
Where is it? Where are you?
Okay,
3.8.
3.8,
Oh, right there. There it is. All right. Yeah, I was trying to find the 100-foot.
I think that's just way too invasive on people's rights.
I think aligning it with the state requirements, going.
That's okay.
I think that's a good standard.
An example of that is Alton used to have 100-foot for a septic system or a septic tank. And the state's 75 and the Board of Selectmen got barraged all the time. But guess what? To waive it. And they did every damn time. So why do it?
Pick your battles.
Yeah. And Trash Swamp, the town doesn't need to have credit on that one. They sold that lot and I went and told the town administrator at the time, you can't sell that. It's conservation lot. He sold it anyway. Then about 15 years later, the guy's coming back in. He can't do anything. And he asked for his money back. He didn't ask for the inflated price. I think the town skated out of that one pretty good.
So my objective was to limit this meeting to 2 hours.
Okay, I'll second that.
6 minutes.
So
Okay.
we get about 6 or 7 minutes to go through the rest of this. I really had on this whole chapter 3, I really had no issues. I've got a bunch of highlights in here, but it was mostly stuff that caught my attention. I'm like, really? That's true? So
So you want to touch on did you have any like hot topics or?
No.
Okay.
No.
On any, in the other chapter or anything? No?
In chapter 5,
Anything we haven't already talked about would be.
Yes,
Because we've touched on a lot of this.
we have.
so chapter 5 on 515, that bottom paragraph there. This is one of those sensitive issues that came up all the time in planning board meetings about private roads. And I just.
Like, that's a headache.
There is no such thing as a permanently private road. And I think that that's a fantastic statement. I think that should be in bold and italicized and underlined.
How about flashing lights?
Yeah, it's a really important thing and it's a nightmare for a lot of towns. I do plan review for 8 communities and 3 of them, I can tell you, have nightmare roads that were intended to be permanently private and are now town.
Oh, yeah, that happens
And
frequently.
that's one reason they involved me in plan review going forward. So.
I think my favorite page is 518, talking about zoning ordinance no longer necessarily represents a comprehensive coordinated approach to achieving the community's vision and goals. I think there's some great sentences and statements on this page.
Thank you, Tara.
Yeah, I'm just, I mean, I was blown away with the document. I really was. And reading it and rereading it, just, I think did an amazing job.
Thank you.
I'm
Obviously-
sorry I bashed the word cloud. The word cloud in the very beginning of this thing.
Cloud. He
The
doesn't
word
like cloud.
cloud.
That's a word cloud.
Oh, word cloud.
Yeah, we're not gonna go there.
We won't hold
You
it
know,
against
look
you.
at-
Not today, but you'll get another shot at it.
Looking at the population,
What page?
5-1.
Oh, yep.
This is pretty unique because 70 to 80 was about 800. You know, then 80 to 90 was about 800. 2000, that one jumped to about 1,200 or a little over, and then about 700. And then 2020 was about 600. So that's pretty amazing because those are all very similar.
Yeah.
So I think if you would blend those, I think it might be a good thing to forecast population going out because those are all relatively the same. So you take that by the 50 years and divide it by, 10 years and you'll see it.
Yeah, what got my attention was under 5.2 land use history. Was in 1803, the population was over 2,000.
1803.
1803.
Long, but I have been told that around the turn of the 1900s and from 1800, there was about 20,000 people here in town. That's not verified, but we had,
Was there gold in the bay or something?
we had all kind of industry here. I mean, we had piano manufacturers, we had the corkscrew, we had the paperclip, ice houses. The ice house up in Mount Major was a 5-story ice house, probably 400 feet long and 150 feet wide, supplied Boston. There was a lot of stuff going on back then.
I would dare say that these numbers are low too. Especially with COVID being in and people all coming, a lot of these people came in COVID and never went home.
Yeah, I thought
That's
myself
very
that
true.
our numbers are very different now than even 2020 for sure.
guarantee.
Yeah,
that this
I
is-
agree with that.
Yeah, and there was some qualification in here about that,
Mhm.
the
Yeah, we
COVID
did try,
perspective.
because it just, I think I alluded to it early, progress happens. Generally, people move outward from the city, right? So even at the turn of the century, when this was a booming place, there was also less places for people to go outwardly, right? Because we were
Right.
still expanding.
Well, you had little villages.
Right, so it keeps you, so yeah, sorry, I just lost my whole train of thought there. So sorry.
Oh, you're not very old. Wait till you get older.
I'm telling you. It's my thyroid, my thoughts will not connect anymore. I need to have,
2019. The transfer station, which you can judge a lot by a transfer station.
Yep.
'cause it's Where everybody comes.
Yep.
It was doing about 1,600 cars through the course of the 4 days it was open. We're up at 6,000. Last weekend after the holiday, we had 6,000 cars in the course of 4 days.
And you can back that up with tonnage too.
You can back it
Yeah.
up with tonnage and not to mention the revenues that is coming in is
Yep.
quadruple.
Yeah.
So.
I took some shingles there. It was $600 dump trail load of shingles. Wow.
Actually, yeah, but I have somebody that buys my-
I had one more suggestion.
more?
Yeah, what about some type of executive summary, a 2 or 3 page, kind of highlight the key thoughts and what trying to achieve?
So is that kind of chapters 1 and 2? I mean,
Yeah,
I
so
know we're not
because
supposed to
it's-
talk about that, but
I will get
Staples
you
has gotta be
chapters
also-
1 and 2.
I've got chapters 1 and 2.
I
I've
know.
read it.
Mine
Okay, but
also.
So-
that's not an executive summary. I'm talking about the whole vision of what the plan is about and what do you want to achieve and
Yeah.
trying to.
Is that not clear?
Jess, does anybody in the
I'm
office,
not sure,
are they left-handed?
yeah, so chapter 1 being the introduction, the vision, chapter 2 being the
I'm
priorities.
just not certain that carries
This
it
is-
through
it
the
was-
way I'm
Can
thinking.
you tell?
Okay.
You're left-handed.
okay.
I was married to one.
Left-handed.
The world was not made for you. I'm sorry.
It's not. Tara, did you hear that about the executive summary or something like?
Yeah, I jotted it down for you guys to talk about tomorrow.
Because it
Thank
doesn't,
you.
to me, it doesn't talk about the details in terms of some of the actions in a more specific fashion on what you're trying to do about commercial zoning changes and things such as that. It's.
So the master plan overall is supposed to be more of a broad stroke.
Yeah, but I think you want to for people who aren't going to read this whole thing, it comes back to that point. Quickly, you want to highlight what the deliverables in that period of time should be. And
Except it's everything in the action plan. Not sure how you
do that
decide.
in a
Go in a
very
different-
abbreviated or concise fashion someday. Only my thought.
Yeah,
I appreciate where you're coming. Could we get to me, that's a lot of information. You think we could get it down? Like whittle
don't
it
know. I
down?
mean-
Like, that's my question.
Well, the last one
Kinda
was
talks
about this
what your
thick.
priorities are going to be.
I think that was
I
1980.
think that's chapters 1 and 2, really.
yeah. So to Doug's point, so I just ran through like 2.1, the goals, and there's no mention in here about reviewing zoning.
I mean, that's all, I mean, this is, apple pie and motherhood, in a sense of what you have for goals. It's not talking about the substantive issues as I see it. Huh?
All right, well, we'll take that up tomorrow with the committee.
We'll talk about it. The sad part
Karen,
about
I
it,
didn't,
most
I
people
guess I
won't
didn't
read
catch
it,
that, so I
period.
appreciate that.
They won't even read the Reader's Digest version. It just, yeah,
That's the sad part about it is you guys are gonna put all this work into it, nobody's gonna read
yeah. Okay.
You guys are gonna read it.
it. Yeah.
Come hell or high water.
Make sure of that.
Uh,
30 times.
Mhm.
All right. So anybody else, anything?
I'd like to offer a motion.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I do want to say thank you very much for putting up with us.
you.
Well, I think this was a great meeting and gives the master plan a lot of good direction, master plan committee.
Getting old?
Thank you.
Tara. See you tomorrow.
Thank you, Tara. We'll see you tomorrow. The master plan meets tomorrow. So yes. That's late. I feel like Jessica. except I don't get paid.